Hello, everyone. It is time for the Forgotten Age. It is the third campaign, the third full campaign for us to review. Can't believe we've done so many of these already, Superfang. How are you feeling about this campaign? Talking about a lot more going on this time, right?
Absolutely. There's a lot of this was for me at least. This was the first one that really explored perhaps a lot of the design space of Arkham, adding a lot of new mechanics, especially during the scenarios themselves, really changing the game up. So I'm excited to talk about it. It has been quite a journey to get here.
And it's really I don't want to say polarizing, but certainly when the campaign came out, there was so much new stuff and so many changes to expectations that I think we'll have a lot to talk about. So we're going to dive right in with indeed those new mechanics that you're referring to. I want to just briefly go over them just for us to kind of think about how they changed what was the kind of normal mechanics of Arkham Horror, the card game. I mean, Carcosa added a few gimmicks, I would say. These things, the explore mechanic, vengeance, supplies, as well as poison, change things in my opinion, more significant way that has impact on gameplay, not as much on the story, I would say. So going in, you have a bunch of stuff at the beginning of the campaign guide that gives you some new rules to read. So let's start with explore. I'm not going to
Yeah.
read out the rules, but basically, it's an activate action that puts locations into play by going through this explore deck. But the thing about the explore deck is it's random and it also includes, in most scenarios, I think an equal number of treacheries as locations. And if you draw a matching location, basically a connecting one or one that you're looking for, then you put it into play. That's a successful explore, but then you could just draw treachery and you resolve a treachery instead and lose your action.
Yeah, it's kind of similar to what they did in the finale of the Dunwich Legacy, where location cards were in the encounter deck instead of being in play. You have to go and fish for them. It's kind of similar, except that, of course, it has its own different encounter deck, albeit with a few treacheries sprinkled in as well.
Yeah, and I think that there's a lot of other treacheries that refer, other mechanics in the actual scenarios that refer to exploration. But to me, the biggest thing is it feels like your map is expanding. You are exploring the jungle, since that is our setting, of course, for this campaign, or at least much of this campaign. So to that end, it's kind of neat. You really do feel like uh, you don't know what you're going to get. You don't know what your map is going to look like until you start exploring.
Absolutely.
And that's a little bit like the Pallid Mask, maybe, but ultimately the map itself is always static.
Mhm.
It's just the order in which things come out is perhaps going to change your gameplay. All right, the next one is called Vengeance, and these are on locations as well as on enemies, and maybe some treacheries too, I think.
Perhaps there is especially one in the return to that we'll get to, but
Sometimes the act or agenda cards might have vengeance on them too. So these
yes.
are just like victory points or victory on them where they go into the victory display and you count whatever this is, vengeance. It says here it represents the awareness and animosity of the father of serpents and is generally a good idea to avoid accruing vengeance points whenever possible. So most likely you get these by defeating enemies with vengeance on them or clearing off clues of locations with vengeance on them. Here is an example. We'll see the boa constrictor in a little bit as well. It's in the first scenario, but this guy has vengeance too. If you defeat him, then off he
Indeed.
goes into the victory display.
Yeah, this is definitely one of the mechanics, if not the mechanic, that changed up expectations for this campaign as a whole. There is a permanent drawback, quote unquote, to defeating enemies. So maybe think twice on defeating the boa constrictor if you can help it.
Mhm. We're going to talk about the consequences for vengeance campaign wide once we get to the points in which how much Yig's Fury, which is what vengeance converts to at the end of a scenario, has. We'll talk about that later. But for now,
Mhm.
in the first scenario, we'll see kind of how it changes the play pattern and what the other consequences beyond just sticking these guys into the victory display has. So you'll see that pretty soon. But it's fairly similar throughout the campaign. Usually it changes modifiers on tests and on the tokens.
Yep.
But indeed, as you say, Superfang, it changes the thinking about evading versus defeating versus discarding enemies, which avoids them going into the victory display, really is different. We haven't seen anything like that before. I think it's a good change, but it is one that causes you to think a lot about deck building.
Indeed, you very much have to go into this campaign with a different deck building mindset.
And that's good and bad, in my opinion. We'll get back to that when we come to maybe balance.
Yeah.
All right, last thing that is worth talking about is supplies. Well, there's just this idea that you're going into a jungle. You need to come up with some supplies. At the very beginning of this first scenario, we actually have to buy some supply points. And then it happens one more time later. It does say each supply has no effect on its own, but we will see that each of them has some effect on locations, treacheries, sometimes act or agenda flips as well, and in between scenarios.
Yeah. Sometimes they can be fairly major as well. It's not like completely game changing, but they can matter a lot. So your choice of supplies is definitely something to pay attention to if you are coming back to this campaign, for example. Of course, if you're going to this campaign blind, perhaps you would have no idea which supplies you'd want to take. So that is something to be concerned about as well.
Yep. Do you generally have ones that you stick to? We'll talk about what they are in a second, but is it your general strategy to pick kind of the same ones every time now?
I sometimes try to not, but I generally do fall into like few like 4 or 5 specific ones that I always take. But that's just how I play, I guess.
Yeah, it is an interesting mechanic because they always have the same effect every time. But whether or not you need them is a different story.
Yeah.
One of the supplies has to do with poison. There's not much to say at this point. It is a permanent weakness that you can get. If you get poisoned, you get poisoned. And it's something to try to avoid. It sounds bad. It is pretty bad. We'll see it on some encounter cards when we go through this set as well.
Yep.
Anything else to add about kind of this prologue of new mechanics?
I think we nailed it. Some pretty new mechanics. Poison honestly is pretty straightforward. It'll make sense for when you get poisoned and when you are poisoned, what changes. But explore, vengeance, and supplies are definitely mechanics to go in with your like, I wonder how this is going to affect the game, and they very much do so.
I do want to not answer this question right now, but I want to pose it. Do you think that these were too many new things for this campaign for players to juggle? I know that in future campaigns they didn't really introduce so many new mechanics like this. A few of them are pretty consequential in other campaigns, but this one feels like a whole pile of stuff.
That's an excellent rhetorical question that you have posed.
Okay, we will try to answer it throughout our reviews here. And let's just go ahead and do as we usually do. Go to look at the map and how the first scenario, the Untamed Wilds, usually plays out.
Yeah. Starting off, a little bit of stuff in the prologue. Actually, it's some stuff that doesn't matter, and then some stuff that does. One, if anyone in your if any one of your investigators is Ursula Downs, Leo Anderson, or Monterey Jack, then they have to be the lead investigator for scenarios 1 and 2. I love this. This is awesome, especially because at this point when the campaign came out, Monterey Jack was not an investigator, but they knew that they were going to put him in eventually. So I love that they future-proofed that.
Me too.
And finally, you're going to be choosing some supplies. So as you said earlier, you're going to be given supply points, and you're going to be spending your supply points on supplies for each of your investigators, depending on the number of investigators you have in your party, I guess. Each investigator is going to get a different number of supply points as listed in that little table there. And as we said, we're not going to go into what the effect of every single supply is right now. We will talk about them when they come up in the scenarios. And yeah, the only thing I want to bring up though is that there are the ones that cost 1, the ones that cost 2, and the ones that cost 3. The ones that cost more are definitely quote unquote more impactful, I should say. And also in TTS they come with this really nice display board. However, 2 or not, or if not 3 of these supplies are not available at the start. So gasoline, pickaxe. I don't know why it's not getting the whole thing. And I think pocket knife. Is that true?
I think you are right.
Yes. I believe everything else is available. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, that seems right. So these might show up later on, and we'll get to those when we get to those.
And later on, these other ones might not be available.
Indeed.
Okay, so
All right.
we start the expedition camp.
Indeed. We started the expedition camp. We'll just flip it over now, I guess.
Yep.
Because we're heading into the jungle, and we have to explore. The explore action is actually on the agenda, strangely enough. But yeah, as it says, as an action, you can explore, draw the top card of the exploration deck. If it is connecting location, put it into play and move to it. Honestly, it's a little bit. I always found this text to be fairly misleading because if it's you have to keep going if you don't draw a connecting location. But yeah, you basically draw until you hit a connecting location or a treachery / enemy, as we'll see.
You're right.
Then you stop, and if you drew a treachery enemy, you draw it, and then if you drew a location, you put it into play and move to it.
You're totally right. I feel like there's always questions online about like, what am I supposed to do? It doesn't say. It's usually
Exactly.
in scenario number 4 that people ask questions. They're like, I don't understand. Is this like a, what do you mean if it is the top, if it is a connecting location? What if it isn't? I don't know. Like the explanation in the campaign guide is good, but then here there's like a lot of text that they should just probably have said explore, done.
Exactly.
Go back to the campaign guide.
Exactly. Like explore, refer to the campaign guide to see what you want to do. Because the entire rules for the explore mechanic are in the campaign guide, and they are correct. So do that. Don't follow what's on the actual card.
Yep.
Anyway, so you're going to be exploring from the expedition camp, and already we see the first supply that is going to matter. There's an action on the expedition camp to check your supplies, and if you have a map, you may look at the top 3 cards of the exploration deck, placing 1 on the bottom and 2 on top in any order.
It is worth saying that after you successfully explore, you put that into that location into play. Any of the locations that were not connecting get shuffled back into the exploration deck. So your order of how you left things can get messed up.
Indeed. Strangely though, if you drew the correct location off the top, you don't shuffle.
That's right.
So only if you miss, if you like dummy draw a location you can't go to, that's when the shuffle is triggered. It's very strange.
It does. I do find that using the map here, sometimes you have to figure out which one to put on top.
Yeah.
And you could put, like, again, the right one on top, you just go to it, and then the bottom can be a treachery. But if you don't do that, then it kind of just gets weird. Yeah. So I don't know. There's no way to fix that. I know, but it's just something to keep in mind as you're deciding what order to put things into the deck.
Indeed. So the current goal is to go into the jungle and get some clues, and we'll go to what the rest of the goal is. But shall we look at the Explore deck and see what's in here?
Yes.
All right. So there are 6 locations to start off with, and then these 4 treacheries. We're going to get to the treacheries when we get to the encounter cards, most likely. So let's talk about these locations. Shall we just talk about... I'll just put them out.
Yeah. So these are the ones that are connected to the expedition camp. We've got the River Canyon.
Yep. So we've got the River Canyon. You can heal a damage from an investigator of the River Canyon, or if you have a canteen, you heal 2 additional. It's pretty good, especially there's a lot of damage in this campaign, so that can save your butt.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Next, we got the Path of Thorns. Am I doing this right? Yes, I am. After you fail a skill test while investigating Path of Thorns, you take a damage. It's haunted, I guess. Mm-hmm. And after you explore while at Path of Thorns, if the exploration was not successful, you also take a damage. So, as I said, already a lot of damage in this campaign. Next is the Rope Bridge. I actually really love the Rope Bridge as a card. Basically, when you attempt to explore, you have to test 2 foot first, and if you fail, you fall into the River Canyon, taking 2 damage. However, if you are successful, exactly, you can heal in the River Canyon after falling off the bridge. Like this right here is like some cool flavor. I love that. All right. Next we got the Serpent's Haven, which I believe is over here. It has Victory 1, which is very nice. Each serpent enemy at Serpent's Haven gets +1 fight. I often forget about this text, unfortunately. And finally, after you investigate or explore while at Serpent's Haven, while you are poisoned, you take a damage. So more damage if you are poisoned. And we'll get to how you can be poisoned in a sec. But
that is our first reference to poison.
Indeed. And finally, we have the Circuitous Trail. Another victory won. Additional cost for you to investigate or explore. That's important. Investigate or explore while at Circuitous Trail. Check the supplies. If no one has a compass, you must spend 3 resources. So
Oof.
that's another supply that's very important. I imagine that you don't like this location.
I bring a compass every time.
There you go. I also try to bring a compass if I can as well.
The nice thing is there's only one per clues here,
Mhm.
so you usually don't have to do it too many times, but the exploration might be important. Notably, as we'll see in a second, these 2 locations are the gateways to other locations. Plus,
Indeed.
I think maybe this one too.
Yes, and I think technically the Path of Thorns as well. It goes down here.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are locations that are going to be starting out. Once you get enough clues, we can advance, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Ichaka shows up, a native of the jungle. So she's going to show up wherever the lead investigator is. Is that correct?
That's
yes,
right.
it is. And you're going to shuffle the encounter deck into the discard pile.
And by the way, we'll talk about these treacheries in a second, but when you resolve them, they go into the regular discard pile of the encounter deck. So
correct.
on this
Very
reshuffle,
important.
you might get them again.
Indeed. So now your goal is you have 2 things to do. You can either defeat her or you can put 1 per clues on her. And if we go to Ichaka, she's an enemy. 5/4/4, especially for a scenario 0 enemy. It's crazy. That 5 fight.
And the parlay here, which is how you get clues, is not easy either. 4 intellect test.
Yeah.
Several times.
All the stats are huge. Also, actually, I guess we should mention, this is the first time we see the alert keyword.
Ooh, what does that mean?
Yes. A certain specter of death had it in the last campaign. Basically, whenever you would fail an evade action against an alert enemy, that enemy will attack you.
So it's kind of like retaliate. Hey, she has retaliate and alert? Yikes.
That's crazy. Yes. And indeed, if you fail that parlay, she might also attack you if she's ready.
Yep.
So
yeah,
she's
this is
going to be
pretty
attacking
tough.
a lot. Yep.
Alert is indeed the first time we've seen it, but it's one that sticks around for the rest of the campaigns in Arkham Horror, the card game.
Yes. It has been upgraded to an evergreen keyword.
Mm-hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. If you evade an exhausted enemy with alert and fail, they still attack you, correct?
They still attack you, unlike retaliate.
Unlike retaliate,
Mm-hmm.
which is hilarious.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I guess that matters for...
matters for Kaimani, matters for some other things that could happen, but...
And that weakness, right?
Yes, there is a unspeakable oath weakness.
Yep.
This is tough. This is, again, if you're replaying this campaign, you are thinking about, how am I dealing with Ichitaka? If you are playing this for the first time, you are saying,
yeah, you're like, my lead investigator is just off over here. He's taking a damage every single turn because they're trying to leave the Path of Thorns. It's crazy. Yeah, this basically the outcome of this scenario, in my opinion, is how well do you deal with Ichitaka? You either win or you lose.
And it's pretty. I mean, it may take a little while to get to this point in the scenario,
Indeed.
but it maybe not, right? You could get your clues, and then you're like, I'm going to advance the act. Why wouldn't I do that? And then you have no actions left as she shows up, and then there's suddenly an arrow in your head from her, right?
Yep, indeed. Speaking of, I just wanted to quickly note, because by this point the agenda might have advanced. So let us quickly advance the agenda, because some new things will come into play. First of all, the first agenda is only 6 Doom, and the second is 9 Doom.
And that's it.
And there are also Ancient Evils in this deck? What?
Yeah, we'll talk about that later too, but you'll note that this this agenda also reshuffles the encounter deck, but it gets us some set-aside encounter cards, which are going to be kind of scary. They're a bunch of serpent monsters.
Yep, and they're going to be shuffled into the encounter deck. And then we need to make a test. Everyone, test Willpower 3. Each investigator who fails either is poisoned, or if they're already poisoned, they take a damage and a horror. So you were talking about earlier, when you replay this scenario, you always have a plan for the Ichaka parlay, or just Ichaka in general.
Mm-hmm.
I also always have a plan for this willpower test. Because this is one of the ways, one of the few ways that you can get poisoned just out of nowhere. And especially in this scenario, as we'll talk about later, getting poisoned makes it really everything starts to go downhill.
It's true. And
Yeah.
3 willpower it's an average test, but not everyone can just randomly take that test and make sure they pass. We will also talk about a certain chaos bag a little bit later too.
Yeah. All right. So that is advanced. You either got poisoned or you didn't. You have your final 9 doom, which is not much. Also,
Nope.
that's the last agenda. And let us figure out what happens once you have dealt with Ishtaka.
So there's 2 things that could happen.
Yes. If there
Either
are 1 per clues on her, you've parlayed her.
So she's happy with you. You talk her down from being, about to shoot an arrow into your head. So you add a cultist token,
Yes.
and you get some ruins locations into play. If you decide to kill her instead, which might be easier, even though she's got 5 fight, the player count doesn't actually scale with her, so she is just 4 health. If you did that, then you remember that you fought with her, and you instead get control of another NPC in this campaign who's very important. He was telling you, if you read the flavor text before, I don't really trust her. And you add a tablet token to the Chaos Bag, and it basically tracks which of these 2 tokens throughout the rest of the campaign of whose side you are on. There's also 2 versions of Act 3A.
Correct. So, real quick, why don't we talk about Alejandro, who is the NPC who joins you if you defeated Ishtaka. 2/2. You get +1 skill value while investigating an ancient location. None of these locations are ancient, but as we'll see, the new locations that are about to pop out are ancient. So we'll help you there. And if you're at an ancient location, you can take an action to exhaust him and draw 2 cards, which is pretty good.
Especially since he just comes into play for free right now.
Yes.
Later,
albeit
he may be added to your deck.
Correct. Although this is also before the time where they did not make him take up an ally slot. He does take an ally slot, so if you get him, he might kick someone else.
Bye, Peter.
Bye, Dr. Mylan. Yeah.
I think he's pretty good. I mean, again, he can stick with you for some portion of the campaign. And he's cheap. He gives you +1 skill value. Doesn't have to be intellect.
And his icons are really good too.
They also are really good.
Yeah.
I have been playing him with Charlie Kane recently.
Nice. That's awesome.
It's really good. Anyway.
All right. So let's go down the Ishtaka route first, I guess.
Sure.
All right. So we're going to go search for the ruins, which is this one. So this is nice because we'll get to the encounter cards later. But the Esley Guardian enemies cannot attack or be attacked, and we ignore the effects of each arrows from the tree's treachery, aka the indigenous peoples are no longer trying to kill you, which is nice. And we need to get to the ruins of Esley and spend 6 clues. The ruins of Esley is one of the ruins that are shuffled into the Explore deck, so you'll have to go and find it.
3 per clues.
3 per clues. Thank you. So actually, you'll need more clues than there are there, which is always
yes, that is a little bit
funny
tough.
moment. Yes.
Yeah. So the ruins of Esley, when you actually do get here, kind of tough. Another haunted effect, right? Drawing the top card of the encounter deck is scary because of Ancient Evils, but a juicy 2 victory points. One thing I didn't add as like mechanics from this campaign, but there's a lot of victory to go around if you can.
There is.
There's
indeed.
2 other ruins locations. This one also has 2 victory. Wow.
Yep. And if you've been keeping your vengeance down, it could just be an easy 2 shroud, 1 for clues. That's pretty nice.
And then Overgrown Ruins, 5 shroud.
5 shroud, yeah. And if you're poisoned, you suck. First action explore. Well, I guess I'm done.
All right. So let's just put them all into play for a second, just to look at our overall map. So you might ignore all these guys. You might be fortunate enough to get to a bunch of these locations and then come and finish off the scenario at the ruins of Esley. But in my experience, that is very tough to make happen. So even though there's a lot of VP here, it is not likely for you to clear it all off in time.
Indeed. It's very difficult.
And the map is kind of tough. Like you can't just, go from one to the other. You have to go back through these areas, which can be very difficult. We'll see the enemies that sort of stick around and annoy you, but it's not that easy. Okay, other version?
Yeah, so we got the guarded ruins. So the indigenous peoples really hate you now. So each Esley guardian enemy gets +1 fight, +1 evade, and each heirs of the tree's treachery gains surge. Oh
No.
god. Luckily though, you only need to spend 2 per clues at the ruins of Esley. I've actually never noticed that.
Yeah.
I thought it was still 3 per.
No,
Wow.
no, they give you a little bit of a help there,
Okay.
so you can
Okay.
just go to the ruins and clear it off.
There you go. That makes sense.
When you do
Uh
uh, advance, then I think both sides have a nice little picture,
yeah.
the same picture.
Discovery of a lifetime. They really do different resolutions, of course.
Yes, R2 for following Alejandro, and
Yes.
R1 for following Ichitaka.
Yes.
And that's the scenario. It sounds so easy, Superfang.
I know. It's really straightforward. Totally.
All right. Tokens?
Let's talk about the tokens. So the skulls -X. X is the number of vengeance points in the victor display. More often than not, for me, just because this is how the way I play, I find this to be 0. And if you can keep it at 0, there are actually like 5 zeros in the bag.
Yes, you're right. There's
so
3
it's-
zeros to begin with and 2
Yes.
more skulls. I 100% agree. I do everything in my power to keep this at a 0 because, man, it's not bad to take tests when you know there's a huge chance of just passing without wasting your cards in hand trying to commit to every
Indeed.
single skill test.
Yep.
Especially the ones that you're already kind of bad at.
Yes.
Like that 3 willpower test, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Cultist only comes in if you are following each Taka.
Yes.
That
Actually,
is...
It's a -5.
It's a -5.
It's a -5. That's so bad. Yeah, that's pretty bad. Luckily, it has no if you fail effect, so it's just you will fail.
Mhm.
But there are a few locations that have if you fail effects, and obviously the treacheries are pretty bad. So
And then the tablet, following Alejandro.
Yeah.
Number cards in expiration deck, that could be 0.
could be 0 theoretically. Albeit if it is 0, you're probably at the end or you're having a bad time.
Yep.
Yeah. That's all right, I guess.
Mhm.
I guess let's say you just defeated Ishtaka. So you just shuffled in 3 more cards.
So there's at least 3.
Yeah, there's at least 3. Most likely there's going to be 5 because either there's a location you haven't been to or a couple treacheries you haven't drawn yet. So, probably going to be bad to start off with.
And then there is the Elder Thing.
Yes, there's one of them in the bag.
Just one, and it's a -2. If you're poisoned, it automatically fails instead. This is a very common thing for the Elder Thing to do in this campaign. I think it happens at least one more time.
Yeah. Don't get poisoned.
Don't get poisoned, kids.
Don't get poisoned.
All right. It sounds so easy. Again, okay. Let's talk about the encounter deck. Maybe that's...
Let's talk about the character.
So first, what's in the exploration deck? We're going to see copies of all of these things, but they do start in the exploration deck. First, low on supplies, peril.
Yep.
You must decide, choose one, and you must choose something that changes the game state. Each investigator loses 2 resources as long as any investigator has 1 resource. That is okay. You can pick that.
Yep, since it'll change the game state, at least to one person, they'll lose the 1 resource they have. That's just changing the game state.
Each investigator takes 1 damage. There's a lot of damage in this one. And then there's the one you should never choose.
Jesus Christ.
I've never chosen that one before.
No, how would you like to crypt chill your entire team?
I don't know. I mean, like, it's okay if everyone just so happens to have an empty gun or something, but...
Yeah.
Ooh. All right. Lost in the Wilds, test 3 willpower.
Jesus.
If you fail, take 1 horror for each point you fail by. Hey, horror is in this one too. And add Lost in the Wilds to your threat area. It's Rotting Remains plus. You cannot move or explore.
Yeah.
That is like the scariest card in this encounter set, maybe. Until the next one.
Yeah. There's I mean, not being able to move is already so bad, but not being able to explore is not even worse, but it is. Like, because oh god. You might map your entire turn and being like, okay, we're gonna explore this turn. And you're like, nope.
So what's interesting about this, of course, is that at the end of your turn, it goes away. So there is certainly a way to move when it's not your turn. So someone else can give you a shortcut to get out of the way. Yep. But ultimately, these cards combo with each other. We'll see why you really want to move. It's not just because you're losing, tempo or whatever. It's sometimes you need to get the heck out of there. especially in some
Indeed.
future scenarios.
Yep.
Snakebite, there's 3 of these. One of them in the Explore deck tests 3 agility. So far we've seen a willpower, an agility test, and we'll see some other ones tested too. If you fail, bye-bye any ally that you have.
Yep.
So again, you can do this even if the ally has 1 health. You can't do it if the ally has no health, like Mysterious
Correct.
Raven.
Or Guiding Spirit.
Or Guiding Spirit. Or take 1 direct damage, get poisoned.
Get poisoned.
If you are already poisoned, you can still take that 1 direct damage.
Correct.
And not have to kill off an ally.
Yeah. This is the quintessential get poison card, along with a little serpent later on. So gotta watch out for this card. It will come at you and poison you out of nowhere.
So there's 3 of them, so it's not like a random thing that sometimes happens. You need to plan for this if you are playing this campaign. So here's an example of ally hate. Here's another example of ally hate.
You said you played this with Charlie? How did this go?
Terrible.
Oh, God.
You bring a ward for this, basically. But the problem with this card, take 1 damage plus 1 additional for each ally asset you control, is the last part. Each other investigator in an ancient location must also resolve that effect.
Right. So I guess the reason I've never seen that bottom text happen is because I've basically always gone Ishchaka, so this card is nullified, right?
As long as you've gotten to that part in the scenario, yes.
But you can only get to the part in the scenario where there are ancient locations after you've dealt with Ishchaka, right?
That is true. The return to actually changes this, but
that is true. You're right about that.
Okay, it's kind of tough here because you sometimes are thinking about using your allies for soak, for damage soak, and this just says nope. You get a damage for every ally you have anyway.
Yeah, I guess the way I think about it is that for a normal investigator, okay, not Leo Anderson or Tommy Muldoon or Charlie Kane, this is either 1 damage or 2 damage, which is not the end of the world, at least. But it's not like it's like a damage to you and a damage to each of your allies directly. Like you can take the 2 damage if you need to.
Yes, you can. That is true, and you just have to have a plan for damage in this campaign.
Exactly.
So there you go. By the way, if this does have Surge and it comes from the Explore deck, you get to draw from the Encounter deck.
You get to draw from the Encounter deck. Oh God. Indeed.
Last one. This one does test the other 2 stats. You can't explore if this Evergrowth is attached to your location, but you can test for intellect or combat to get around it.
Kind of like a locked door for exploring.
It's a nice card. It's usually pretty soft. I find like you just find another way around. If you draw it early, then you have to deal with it. But usually there's another way around.
Yeah.
That's it. So all of those are down here too. So it's not just one of those in the deck or the Explore deck. There's actually several of a bunch of them. So we've seen Overgrowth.
Yep, there's 2 of them total.
Voice of the Jungle.
Yeah, so if you didn't explore, you take a horror at the end of your turn, and you can take an action to test 3 willpower to discard it. Honestly, that action tax to discard it is very annoying.
Yeah, on top of exploring, right? It's like either so again, successfully explore is to get a location that is connecting. There may not be any locations that are left.
Indeed. So you might just take a horror every turn until you die.
Or get the test done. As usual, anyone at your location can do these tests.
Yep.
Let's go through these guys at the after we do the ones that start in the Encounter deck.
Sounds good.
Hello.
Hello. It's the other way that you're going to get poisoned, by being bitten by a pit viper. So yeah, after it deals you damage from its attack, if you're not poisoned, you become poisoned. Notably, when it says deals you damage from its attack, that actually, wait, hold on. Is that now changed?
Nope.
Even if you assign it to an ally asset?
You are still poisoned, yes.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like that didn't used to be the case, right?
I don't know.
Anyway.
As far as I know, it's always been the case.
Basically, I believe in the before time, you getting dealt damage if you were not getting dealt damage if you had to assign it to an ally, but that counts now as you being assigned damage. So basically, no matter what, if this guy attacks, you're getting poisoned. I believe.
I believe the guard dog circumvents this though, because guard dog is a when it can bite the pit viper back before the
Oh,
forced
I
effect
see.
happens.
Got it. Yeah, as long as you're able to kill it before the effect resolves, I guess.
However, you might not want to kill this guy because he's got Vengeance 1.
He also has Vengeance 1.
And there's 3 of them. Cool. They tend to pop up, if they pop up in a location where you have no other connecting places to go, they're really tough. Like, the general plan is to evade and leave, and that's 2 actions.
Because they do not have Hunter.
Right. And they just can sit around and you're like, I'm never going back there. But, I mean, they'll poison you if you take an attack of opportunity to move, so you have to disengage somehow.
Yep.
Oh. Bow Constrictor has Vengeance 2. They don't have the poison thing, but they do have Hunter.
Yeah, Hunter with Vengeance 2 is very annoying, especially if you want to just leave them to go. They're just going to come back and get you, and gonna double exhaust your cards, I guess.
I find that part is like the least concerning part of this card.
Yeah.
Yikes. If you draw this early in the scenario and you're always trying to stay one step ahead, I don't know, maybe you just kill him.
Yeah. At that point, I think you just kill him.
This is like a pretty interesting way to think about, I think is it Close Call from the core set? You shuffle an enemy that you evaded back into the encounter deck or something?
Yes. There's a guy on the art.
Yeah.
And he's like in front of a door.
That's right.
Something.
I've never played the card, but stuff like that and Dumb Luck are maybe interesting here.
Interesting.
But ways to get these snakes off the board so you can move around in relative peace. There's something to be said there.
Yep.
Snake bite. There's 3 of them.
There are 3 snake bites, so lots of getting poisoned, as we said before.
Okay, poison encounter set comes with 2 copies of Creeping Poison, which is just a surge. Everyone who's poisoned takes a damage.
God. Don't get poisoned.
Don't get poisoned.
Don't get poisoned. This basically is in every scenario. Not actually every scenario, but it's basically in every scenario. And yeah, you either have to think about this or just don't get poisoned. Don't get poisoned.
All right, 3 copies of Lost in the Wilds, as I said before. Cool.
Yep.
2 copies of Lone Supplies. We've seen it before. The Esley Guardian we have not seen.
Yeah. So he's going to spawn at any empty location, ancient if able. I have actually had this happen where there are no empty locations. So this guy doesn't spawn, which is very nice.
Yeah, draw him turn 1. Everyone's still at the camp.
Indeed. He does have Alert, and he does have Aloof. And when he attacks, if he's ready and unengaged, he attacks every investigator at each connecting location. He's sniping people from the trees.
I don't mind this guy. I mean, he could get kind of annoying, but everything else here is worse.
Indeed. Like it's hard to put him in a location that can hit everyone. Like I'm obviously put him here or there. He can hit like up to 4 locations, like these 4 or like these 4. But if you put him like in the Serpent's Haven, for example, he can like do only these 4. But later on, if you go Ichitaka, then they just don't do anything anymore. It's pretty okay.
Yeah, and I think that if you draw the second one, it's a little bit more difficult because they have to go to empty locations, and then you tend to have basically everything. Just go kill them.
Although, if you've been evading a lot of enemies previously, there might not be empty locations, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, it kind of depends on player count too, since the map doesn't get any bigger.
Yep.
And then...
Why is it here? I don't know if this scenario needed this.
It didn't. This scenario, I think we're going to like give it some demerits later, but the Ancient Evils here really speeds up this one. So there's a couple of reshuffles.
Yeah, there's at least 2.
And if you draw like 1 or even, 2 or even 1 of them before the reshuffles, you're going to have a bad time.
Yep.
If you don't draw any of them, or you ward them or something, then it's somewhat manageable, but holy cow.
Yeah, that's a lot of Ancient Evils. I guess, like, I think the idea is that you're like kind of almost not meant to get to the end of this scenario, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
It's very mean, but you're right.
Yeah. Um,
I said about the victory points earlier, there's so many of them. It's so tempting to look at the board and say, I could get like, I think 10? I think there's like maybe 10 victory points you could get.
Something like that. It's either 10 or 11 or something.
So there's two, that's 6, 7, 8, one for each taka, or two for each taka?
Uh,
One.
one, and then also the serpent from Yoth.
So that's 10, and maybe there's some bonus somewhere. I don't know.
Oh, I mean, yeah, there's ways to get bonus in the interlude.
Right. Okay. So that's so many, but in practice, you're getting like maybe 6.
Yeah. Which, I mean, still for a first scenario is pretty good.
It is nice. But man, the Ancient Evils, like again, this 9, it seems like a hard number, but it's very deceptive because the movement through the map here, because you have to end here at the Ruins of Etzli, is gonna take you a while.
And the action tax of the explorer will naturally take away turns from you.
Yeah, the failed explorers, the evading of all these enemies to try to get around them or away from them, it's tough.
Yep. Should we talk about some more serpents?
Yeah, so after the first agenda, you get to add in, should be 3 copies of Brood of Yig.
There should be. I don't know where the third one is. There it is.
All right, so these guys are 2/3/2, but actually +1 fight for each vengeance point in this victory display, so could be 7?
A lot. Technically, I guess. Yeah, that's true. In this scenario.
Mm-hmm. Don't do that.
No, probably don't do that.
Otherwise, they're kind of like basic enemies. The one thing to note is that this is a 3 health enemy, and we're going to see a lot of 3 health enemies in the rest of this campaign, mostly because we see these guys over and over again.
Yeah, this is I think one of the first enemies in scenario 1 that has 3 health. Normally they start off with either 1 or 2 health. So it's not that big of a fight value if you can keep the vengeance low, but 3 health is not nothing, especially at level scenario 1.
Mm-hmm. So it's just more action tax basically for an extra fight against these guys, or you're doing something else to churn through the health.
Yep.
Here's another bunch of health.
Indeed, 5 health.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot.
While there are a lot of text here. While there are 1 or more vengeance points in the victory display, Serpent from Yoth gains Retaliate. While there's 2 or more, Hunter. While there's 3 or more, 1 less damage from each attack.
Jesus Christ.
Don't let that happen.
Don't let that happen.
This is, I find to be like a nice enemy to just say, here's how we're getting some victory points. I like drawing this guy as long as you're reasonably set up. The 1 damage to horror is admittedly kind of scary if you have the Retaliate on, but otherwise, I want to kill this guy.
Yeah, seems pretty nice.
The 3 fight is pretty small, I think.
Yeah.
Last, Curse of Yig.
Yeah, this God, this card. So -1 fist, -1 health. You gain the serpent trait, which does not do anything, but is very flavorful.
Mm-hmm.
I wish it did something. Honestly.
I do too.
And you can test as an action, test 2 willpower. It gets +1 difficulty for each vengeance point in the victory display. If you succeed, you discard it. So hopefully you keep your vengeance down. You can get this off. It is there. It has -1 health. This card has killed me more often than any other card. Because I always forget. I'm like, oh yeah, I could just not take damage with like a deny existence. You cannot deny a -1 health though.
It's true. Yeah, if you're not paying attention, there's 2 of them, so you can easily get 2 and be at -2 health and just die because you have 4. If you're a 6 health investigator, if you have 4 health on you, 4 damage on you already, and you draw 2 of these, you're just dead.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty bad.
Again, anyone can do the willpower test though. Just do it before vengeance stacks up. So there's like so much in this set that conspires against you from multiple angles, right? There's the poison that puts the damage on you.
Yep.
There's all these vengeance enemies that make it harder to kill the non-vengeance enemies. Yeah, I mean, don't get poison, don't get vengeance.
Yeah,
just get to the end.
Just don't play the scenario. Just skip it.
Oh, uh, let's talk about the resolutions then before we.
Yes, because there is a lot during the resolutions. So first of all, if you resigned or was defeated, you did not get to R1 or R2. You have to write down the investigators were forced to wait for additional supplies, which I believe just impacts the next scenario, if I'm not incorrect.
I
I don't
think
actually know where that is.
I think so, or maybe it's somewhere later.
Oh, here it is. It changes the intro. Does that actually change anything? I'm not sure.
Um, it's referred to at least one more time later in the campaign.
Yeah, I remember that. I guess we'll see when we get there.
Hmm.
Um, then there's some more things about whether or not you have Ishchaka observing your progress, or if you fought with Ishchaka or it's leading your way, you will still get those campaign entries to have her earn your trust, or if she's wary.
Hmm.
Um, Finally, you will have Alejandro either join you, you could add him to your deck, or he chooses to remain at camp. Um, which is also what happens during R1 and R2. R1 is that Alejandro chose to remain in camp, and the investigators have earned Ishtaka's trust. R2 is that Alejandro will join you, and Ishtaka is wary of the investigators.
Yep. And then they warn you about Yig's fury.
Indeed. Beware of the anger of the father of serpents.
Let's see
Finally,
the.
though, we have
I
an
know
interlude.
you've done it where you've angered him, but we'll talk about that later.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I had like 20 at the end. Don't worry about it. All right, we got an interlude. So, first off, everyone with a blanket is fine. Everyone without gets a physical or mental trauma.
So
Yay.
I wanted to put this in the like new mechanics, but it's not really new. But TFA also really known for handing out trauma like candy.
Indeed. All right, so that's a blanket. That's what a blanket does, by the way. It prevents this trauma. Next, or not everyone, the investigators as a group must cross off a provision per investigator. Every provision that they do not cross off, an investigator begins the next scenario with 3 fewer resources.
Boo!
Yeah, I thought you would hate this. Um, yeah, that's pretty bad.
My Charlie Kane deck had indebted as a random basic weakness.
No! Oh no.
Uh, anyway, he made sure he could eat.
Yeah. All right, the next one. So, the lead investigator must choose someone to be the group's lookout. If that investigator, the chosen one, has binoculars, then that investigator will earn 2 additional experience. Otherwise, that investigator will suffer a mental trauma. So,
What's with
yikes.
this? Like, there, either you get 2 XP or a mental trauma, and I know that
Yeah.
like, I find that this sometimes causes like glares across the table where one person gets 2 XP and everyone else is like, uh, fine. I guess you'll get
Yeah.
more XP, and I'll just sit here and not get anything extra.
Yeah, especially in the blind playthrough, you're like, oh god, either no one took the binoculars and someone's just like, okay, I guess I took a mental trauma, or someone luckily did, and they're like, oh yay. But for us, like my play group, this one is always the one that we're like, okay, who wants binoculars? Because everyone wants it. Obviously,
Hmm.
2 XP is really good, but some decks may like 2 XP more than others, so try to usually keep that into account.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, were they throwing ideas at a dartboard and they came up with like extra XP for one person for picking a
Right.
random thing? I'm not a fan of this. I mean, I love the XP. I always try to take the binoculars, but
Yeah.
I think this is too uneven. Like,
It does feel like you have to take, like someone has to take binoculars, no matter what, also.
yeah, I wish
All
that
right.
everyone could share the victory points or
Yeah,
something.
that's true. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they would theme that, but definitely seems like a better solution.
Anyway, poison. If you're poisoned, you not only did all those bad things happen to you, and maybe you just died
Yep.
because you had poison and you got physical trauma from being defeated. Well, I have news for you. Here's another physical trauma.
Yeah. Luckily, though, at this point, you can cross off medicine in order to cure someone's poison weakness. 1 medicine per. So if you took the medicine, which it costs 2 supply points, so that's a lot.
Mhm.
Um, you can't prevent that. But yeah, if you got poisoned, bad luck. Physical trauma.
Yep. So one for just
And
still having it. Are you a blanket or tank it kind of person?
I am a blanket. Um, basically, so we can go. I can go through this now. I always take blanket. I always take binoculars, and I always take torches. Those are the three that I always have to take, and then the rest are kind of like provisions or maybe a compass.
Mm-hmm. So tell me about your, I mean, so the blanket comes back later. It does the exact same thing. So
Yeah,
what's your feeling on why you take it?
because I don't want trauma, and I know, and I know that like, if you technically math it out, the trauma probably doesn't matter, but like, I don't know, it just feels bad.
I usually skip it. I'd
Mhm.
rather take, I don't know, one of these other things instead. I tend to bring more soak than most people do anyway.
Interesting.
And one trauma isn't that big of a deal until it, just reaches a critical mass in my
Yeah.
experience.
Right.
But I do take it sometimes. This is like another question to kind of pose. Do you take in the thick of it in this campaign now?
Good question. Well, actually, maybe this is a surprise, but I actually don't even take in the thick of it to begin with. Um, maybe just because I haven't like brought it into my playstyle yet because I still take like arcade research, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I don't take in the thick of it, so I guess my answer is still no. But
Okay.
what about you?
I mean, this is like, I'm relatively confident that I can get enough XP in this campaign that it doesn't really
Right.
help me. I'll do
Yeah.
it sometimes though, because this scenario is hard, right? I don't like to talk about difficulty in blanket terms, haha,
Uh,
so much, but it is a tough one, and anything you can do at the beginning of the campaign to help get through this one, it might make a difference. I don't know if 3 XP is enough for most investigators to really make a difference. Depends on your deck, depends on the investigator, I don't know, but I'll consider it, but usually in that case I will take the blanket, of course.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Before we move on to ratings,
Hmm.
real quick story.
Sure.
So blind playthrough, um, actual blind playthrough with two people who are also doing blind playthrough with me. Um, I believe we failed the scenario because everyone died. So everyone had a physical trauma, and then uh, we missed that there was an interlude. So
Mm.
we, left the night. We're like, oh, we took some trauma, whatever. And then I read the interlude, and I'm like, guys, so we actually all took 3 trauma, and someone took an extra one.
Oh
So
no.
do you want to start over? Because
Who
no one had blanket, everyone got poisoned, and then the binoculars.
who was your
So
team? Do you remember?
yes, it was Nathaniel Cho. Someone was Finn Edwards, and I was Ursula Down. So we already had the inclination that we needed to get like some good foot values, but we just didn't. We just did not know what the scenario was going to throw at us.
What did Nathaniel
Um,
Cho do in this one? Like try to punch
correct.
snakes?
Correct. Nothing.
Uh,
Um, However, that eventually he swapped out his investigator for Sister Mary, which was hilarious.
that's interesting.
Um, he had to get the armor of Ardennes not to die. Honestly, it kind of pulled through. Um, but that
Yeah, I
was
was
an
going to ask you a
experience.
little bit of like what stories you've had with this one, having played it obviously numerous times. So my first playthrough was I was Winifred. We had Ursula and Agnes,
Oh yeah,
and we did really really well. In fact, I
Agnes is really good actually for
Agnes
this.
was great in this scenario. Um, but I think we actually cleared off a couple of these locations,
Yeah,
the the ancient ones, and I think we actually even had time for maybe even pulling off one more. But then we were like, let's just end it. So it's gone really well for me sometimes,
hmm
and then sometimes I gotta tell you, I tried to get the last clue off of Ruins of Etzli. We could have spent like we had enough clues, I think, to advance anyway,
yeah,
and I didn't. I don't think it was me. It was who I was playing with. Drew the auto fail or something like that, maybe a -5,
yeah.
um, and drew the top card of the encounter deck, and it was Ancient Evils.
No.
Scenario
Oh
over.
no. God damn.
It was like,
The
I think we can just pull this off and then just spend the clues, and no.
no. The best I've ever done in this scenario is I played two-handed Wendy Adams and Silas Marsh, and I got all of the victory. And that was the most powerful I've ever felt in my life.
Yeah, sounds good. I think like a good team can do very well, but also the stars have to align.
Yeah.
The encounter deck, I think, is just things have to come out in the right order.
Yep.
We didn't mention the rest of the bag. I don't know if that's set up over here. Probably down over here now. I mentioned the three
Oh yeah,
zeros.
we forgot there's a -5 in the bag.
But yeah, there's a -5. I'm actually a big fan of it. You get used to -4 in basically every other campaign on standard.
Yeah.
I think on easy this is a -4. I think.
It's a -3 actually.
It's just a
I believe.
-3?
Yes, like that's. I mean, because normally on easy the bottom is -2, so it kind of does the same -1 trick. But
Really? I felt like the worst on easy was -3 usually.
I mean later on, obviously.
Oh, okay.
I believe that usually it starts off as -2.
Hmm.
I believe. I could be wrong.
Anyway, I so basically it's either you treat it as an auto fail because you're not beating it.
Yeah.
Or it's something like sometimes you do beat it, but it's not something you try to get up 5 on every test because that's not something that you probably want to do on standard.
Yeah,
but the rest
I'd
of
say
the bag
that
is pretty good.
exactly. Like especially in this first scenario, if you can get like reliably -1 or up 1, up 2, you can pretty much pass everything. If you get up 3, you're like solid. Because the -5 you base, as you said, is basically not a fail.
I think that's true for most of the campaign. So as much as everything over here is gross, you should have a shot. And honestly, like investigator choice, yeah, like having 3 or 4 agility is gonna go a long way, I think, because of the token bag. But even anyone who has got like the flat 3s or something somewhat like that is gonna do okay. They should be able to commit and pass most tests that are ones they weren't trying to pass.
Yep. And I did verify Carcosa's easy mode. The lowest is a -2.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, I like the -5. I'd like to see it again in another campaign that's kind of hard, but also there's so many zeros. Usually you only have 2, right?
Yeah. It definitely puts the fear in you.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, uh, that's it, I think, for the board.
Mhm.
And then we'll maybe do some overall discussion in a second.
Yep.
So as usual, we like to break down our ratings of these scenarios by replayability, fairness, balance, and experience. And we'll start with replayability as we usually do, asking, how replayable is the scenario? Is there some differences, different ways to go through, different paths? And is there more to enjoy when you continue to play it, or does it feel kind of stale? This one is interesting. So there's 2 paths, kind of. There's the path through Ichitaka and then the one through Alejandro. These are pretty much the same except for the behavior of those treacheries and enemies and the number of clues you need to spend. It really has more consequences later on. I like that they seed that here and make some, choices count. Otherwise, where do you see the replayability?
I think that there is it's kind of less like Midnight Masks replayability and perhaps Devour Below replayability in the sense of this scenario always made me like I want to do better at this first scenario just to see how good I can get. Especially in the early parts of the scenario. Like I think that a lot of the randomness and variability of the scenario comes in like the first 5 to 6 turns of where you're drawing cards from the exploration deck. If you hit certain treacheries, if you hit certain locations and getting them out to get to the victory locations, for example, it very much changes the flow of those initial turns. I agree though that like once you get Ichitaka out, either by defeating her or by parlaying with her, the scenario basically becomes the same thing where you're like, okay, find the Leslie ruins if we can go get the other victory, and that's the goal of the scenario. But I do like the aspect of trying to do the best you can, because this scenario definitely leans into the being very difficult and wanting you to excel as much as you can.
Yeah, I think you hit on a bunch of really important stuff. I'd also add that the order in which the enemies comes out can really change how you kind of move about the map. It's tough, right? It's tough
Yeah.
when you have to deal with those sorts of problems rather than having a relatively clear path. Um, so that can change how you go about your business. It's nice that the victory points are all kind of at the bottom of the map, so you don't really need to backtrack to the beginning or anything if you left clues behind.
Yeah.
But I kind of agree with you with this overall. You want to replay it because you want to do better. However, if you're kind of burned out by Arkham, this is not fun to replay.
I guess that is true.
You know what I mean? Like this is one of those scenarios that really grinds you down. And if you really enjoy that aspect of Arkham and you are having a good time um, with your play group, and you really are trying to strive for doing well, and you can kind of laugh off the ancient evils, uh, I think it's a good time.
Yeah.
You're gonna enjoy coming back to it and saying, let's see if we can manage to clear off all three locations because it feels like a really nice accomplishment.
Hmm.
Eh,
With that on mind, where do you
Yeah,
put it on a scale?
I don't know. I'm starting to think about it still.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I I think I'm gonna put it at a 3 because I do like the aspect of trying to get better at it, as it were. Um, and yeah, I think
It
that's
it
where I'm
really
gonna put it.
rewards you knowing. I think this whole campaign rewards you for knowing the scenarios, and you kind of feel good about like anticipating some of these things that come up, right?
Yeah.
Three sounds fine to me. Okay, maybe we'll have more to talk about for the next one. So fairness. Again, when we talk about this, we are asking the question: is the encounter deck, is the scenario pulling a bunch of cheap shots on us, or can players really roll with the punches in a meaningful way? And then, kind of, is there an appropriate amount of pressure on the investigators? That's sort of the proxy for me on like that kind of difficulty. That did they speed things up too much,
Right.
or sometimes it's gone the other way where there's too much time. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think that if any scenario is going to be considered unfair, I think it's this one. I think it's a combination of things. It's like it's fair in some circumstances because of the fact that like, up front you know about vengeance. So to a certain extent you can be like, okay, I know that I want to not kill these enemies, so maybe we have to plan for that. Um but I think that's one, the inclusion of the ancient evils is such a dick move. Um but like, okay, not even that. Like it's, we always say with ancient evils is like having ancient evils isn't like the worst thing in the world. It is a free encounter draw, but having them reshuffle into the deck and that being a very random element of this scenario, it's impossible to mitigate the randomness of, oh, we drew two ancient evils and it got shuffled in and we drew two more and now we have like 5 turns left.
yeah. It
um
goes from 15 rounds to like 11, right?
yeah. And I think, a lot of people have said this, that if the scenario didn't shuffle the encounter deck that often, I think that the scenario would be a lot more fair, because of the Ancient Evil shuffling effect that it has.
So do you think
Um,
the fact that the act and the agenda reshuffle is on purpose, or did they just not even consider maybe we should shuffle the enemies into the deck and leave the discard pile as it was?
that's a good question. I think that probably what happened, this is just my thoughts, is they were like, okay, we want to have these new cards go to the encounter deck. So shuffle this encounter set in. Oh, but maybe during playtesting, they were like, the deck is so thin at this point that, the encounter deck itself is so small that those new cards that got shuffled in are very impactful. So that's usually the way that we fix that is by shuffling the discard pile back into the deck. Um, so I don't know. It's like it's tough to design that, I guess.
It's really tough depending on the player count too, because I last played this in 4 player, and the encounter deck in this one and in Boundary Beyond goes really quick.
Yeah, yeah. There's
And
only there's only like 20 cards in the
Yeah,
base
yeah,
deck.
that's like 5 rounds, right, to see everything.
Yep. Yep.
Compared to, say, Circle Undone, which is the next cycle, which very often does not reshuffle the discard pile into the deck, partly because they're trying to make you hit certain cards in those sets, and that's other reasons going on there. But they did kind of judiciously think that one through.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um,
It's not just that, right? It's the supplies in the interlude, right?
yeah.
There's just kind of like, well, you picked the wrong one. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say I think that this scenario doesn't have a lot of impactful supplies except during the interlude. Like not having the map, fine. Not having the compass is annoying. I'll admit with that. That's why I usually take the compass.
Yeah, because you have to
Um,
spend the resources. You don't just lose them.
yeah. Um, yeah. I mean, not having the compass is bad, but the other things, the not having the blanket, the binoculars, all that stuff, it's really painful. Um, so I would say that like the way that I'm thinking about evaluating the supplies is that like in a vacuum the supplies do nothing, and so in this scenario, is it that bad if I don't have these certain supplies? And I think for the interlude, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in other scenarios, not having a pocket knife is like whatever. Um,
Chalk.
so
Chalk is kind of important.
that's true. Although I usually don't. I usually get away with not having chalk,
Oh my
as we'll
god.
see later.
What are you doing?
I know, right?
Uh,
Yeah, free vendors, whatever. Anyway, so
it's
with
less
that in
that and
mind,
more of like, if you don't know anything coming in, then
right?
it's not just one of these things, it's all of them.
That's true. Yeah.
And this is why,
Uh,
like, in general, I think the campaign, people, when it first came out, were like, this is awful. And
yeah.
nowadays, it's been, what, 6 years? Something like that.
Yeah.
People love this campaign.
I think it definitely is because much more of the player base has aged up, I guess you could say. Much more of the player base has played the campaign or played it again.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people are like, "Oh yeah, I remember it. It was such a challenge. I missed the challenge, so let's go back and do it." Right. Um,
And the reason I
but
bring
I
it up here is that, can the player mitigate random elements? Some of these random elements are the the player can anticipate them, right? Anticipate the
Yes.
challenges asked for by the campaign. Even just bringing a mystic around for canceling ancient evils could be
Hmm.
more important than usual.
Yeah. Um, yeah. So I think ultimately what my opinion on this, I'm just gonna rate it. I'm gonna give it a 2. It's Ancient Evils.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that ultimately, like as I said, the supplies thing it's annoying, but I agree that like supplies are almost you know what it is. I think that supplies as a mechanic is kind of built for the replay.
Yeah.
And if you never replay, then you miss out on like the fun that you can have with the supplies because I think there is fun to have there. But for blind playthroughs, it is basically random.
The thing about the supplies is there's so many of them that are negative, right?
Yeah.
I think on, I don't know, if I can't remember a campaign that maybe does something similar to this, but eh, on a replay, you pick the things that avoid the negative stuff for the most part, unless you can,
Yeah.
say, whatever, I'll take the trauma. Um, Sometimes it's more fun and maybe feels more fair if there's just different benefits for all of them, but you can't take them all.
That I agree with. Like, for example, that's why I take binoculars, because there is the 2 XP to get if you take it. But it does have the negative aspect. But if it didn't have the negative aspect, then it's just like you get a thing for taking the thing, and then nothing if you don't.
Yeah. Okay, where am I going to sit here? It's it doesn't. I mean, it's not horrible, right? Like, there are
No.
ways, and ultimately, if you train yourself to think, I only want to measure my success by how many victory points I got out of the total possibilities, then this one isn't for you. It can happen, you can get them all, but you're still going to do fairly well if you just try to get to the end, get the clues on that last location, and be done.
Yeah.
If you're trying to push it, the game will push back.
Hmm.
It's really the Ancient Evils, though. I'm going to give it a 1.5.
All right. Yeah,
There's not
Evil
much
suck.
you can do, right?
Yeah.
The Explore deck isn't the worst here either, but sometimes you're sitting on an ancient location and you pull that card. I know it has to be Alejandro's route, but still. The other part is just the appropriate pressure, right? I think it would be better if they eased up a teeny bit more on this first scenario. I like a tough challenge. I really do, but probably too much variance for me on this one.
Yeah.
So now about the player side of things.
Oh man, this is hard.
This is the first time
Balance.
everyone says agility matters. Bring someone who can evade. Whenever advice is asked for about this campaign on the internet, that's what you see. So part of this,
Yeah,
it comes from the experience of the first two campaigns.
yeah, it's hard because it kind of what it attempts to do is move the needle of balance, where it's trying to tell you, hey, you're gonna need to bring evade and high agility in this campaign, which is not, to a certain extent, not something that was supported by the investigators or the card pool when the campaign came out, kind of. Um, I mean, obviously, a lot of the investigators in Forgotten Age are very well suited to this campaign, namely Ursula and Finn. Poor
Even,
Leo having one agility.
even Father
Uh,
Mateo has 3 agility.
that's true. Yeah. Although him getting an extra enemy in his deck is terrible.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, right?
It's so bad.
They'll get
Um,
+1 fight at the snake pit.
Yep. Yep. Oh God. Um. Anyway.
Hmm.
Have you played Calvin through the Forgotten Age?
No.
It seems like a nightmare.
No, I mean that one there's too much trauma that you get on your own. I mean that's
Yeah.
I don't know if that's fairness or balance or whatever of
Yeah.
the entire campaign, but
It's hard to balance around Calvin. So
yeah. I mean he's
yeah.
good in lots of campaigns, but the one that he came out in, there's another reason why he's not great. But
Yeah.
we'll get to that eventually.
Yeah. To give this scenario credit, if anything, it kind of does spread out a lot of the tests. Like we saw before that there's intellect parlay test. There's
Mhm.
still willpower test. There's that fist test on the overgrown thicket or whatever it's called.
You do need someone to fight to deal with the enemies, really. Other than the 3
Yeah.
snakes, the 3 pit vipers, and then the boa constrictor, you can kill everything else.
Yeah, that is true, including Ashtaka.
So, like, I think that idea that you need to evade everything is a bit overblown. There's a few other ways to deal with those guys. I think you do want someone to evade, but
Like ideally, you get someone who can do both.
yeah.
Like that's why I think Silas is so good in this entire campaign, because you're right. Like, and this is something I'll get to when I talk about the end of the Doom of Esley. But the first two scenarios are so much like you're gonna need to evade, you're gonna need to evade, you're gonna need to evade, and then you're like, wait, we're in Threads of Fate now. We're in Depths of Yoth now. Like, where is our fighter? We need our fighter right now, and we didn't bring him.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like it's almost like a bait and switch. It like kind of baits you to be like you have to evade a lot, but you're like, no, you're still gonna need a fighter. So it's interesting in that respect. I don't know how to judge it though.
I mean, I will say that I kind of like that for maybe shaking up the meta there because I like evading. I don't think evading is like the worst thing you could possibly do in other
Mm-hmm.
campaigns too. It can really help out the team. Of course, you actually need to kill enemies too. And
Yeah,
the fact that this campaign tells you you need everything, really, because the
yeah,
willpower test, again, going back to the whole idea of what stats are tested, the agility tests are mean, but the willpower tests are there too, and they
yeah,
are also mean.
yeah.
So I don't know.
I
Again,
you
if
know
you,
what it is? I think the balance it trends more towards very good investigators. It's hard to bring an investigator that isn't up to snuff. Do you know what I mean? I think just because of how hard this campaign is in this scenario specifically, because we're still talking about the scenario. But like,
so I think that that maybe what you're getting at, or at least my interpretation is, it's not just that you need good investigators. You need a deck that is fairly good at what it's trying to do.
yes,
So
As
if you have someone who can get clues, as long as they're not just like dirtling around for the entire scenario, if they know how to do it, whatever way they can do it is good.
yeah, I think that yeah, I think you're right in what I'm trying to get at. It's like you this campaign, and I think also this scenario is very resistant to jank.
Hmm.
Like, I think that in order to succeed this scenario, you have to bring your A game, or you have to break the scenario. And so, in that sense, the balance is skewed because it doesn't allow certain playstyles of people who like doing the jank stuff, if that makes sense,
That's
or
true.
people who aren't just as good deck builders.
Right.
Um, I don't know if that is balance, but it kind of feels like it, so I'm gonna say it.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I agree. Um, I'm not one of those kind of deck builders though that tries to do something that some random combo that's really silly. I don't do that often, so I don't know how it plays out in this campaign. I can see that
Yeah,
obviously it in this scenario doesn't
no,
play out very well. But there are some really good investigators who are well suited, right? Like Finn, Ursula,
yeah,
Kaimani, right?
yeah,
There's there are stronger investigators who are well tuned, but fine tuned, if you will, for this campaign. Uh, but I don't think the ones that are I don't know. I would run Jim here. Like it's kind of sounds strange, but I think he could do just fine as long as he is doing what he's trying to do. Like I don't think
mm,
he's. I think that the zeros in the bag are going to help him along with all the skulls, right?
fair enough. Yeah, would you run Jenny?
Sure, why not?
All right, all right, all right.
She's got the money. She can pass any test.
She could pay for the compass.
She can pay for the compass.
Yeah. All right. With that in mind, I know we've been on this slide for a while.
I know.
I'm actually gonna put it in the middle. I'm gonna put it at a 3 because I think that it like overall the campaign gives it this kind of new sense of balance,
Hmm.
but also this scenario really pushes the investigators, and for me personally, pushes some investigators out of being able to succeed.
Okay, I guess I know we're been here forever, but what's like the weirdest investigator you brought to this campaign?
The weirdest investigator I've brought to this campaign.
Like one that you wouldn't expect to do so well.
Well, I normally don't do that. So, um, uh, oh God, I don't know. I mean, it's hard for me to say because I normally just bring an investigator that I think is going to do well.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, an example of an investigator that I don't think would do very well, um, is someone like Sister Mary, and my friend did bring Sister Mary, and it did work out. Um, so that was interesting.
I brought
Definitely.
Harvey.
Oh,
I mean, two
I mean,
agility.
it's hard. It's hard to go wrong with tons of card draw. I mean, like,
I agree. So I was gonna say like you, you fixate so much on some of the like innate abilities uh, geared towards this campaign, and sometimes you can say, well, you know what? How did he deal with the thrice damned curiosity with all the damage? Bring some extra damage healing.
sure.
Bring a bunch of allies and make them take all the damage for you, and just kill them off with a snake bite anyway.
Right. And but again, this does also assume that it's not a blind playthrough. Like
Correct.
if you're going in blind as Harvey Walters, you're gonna die.
Yes, you're totally right.
Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, I'm going to go out there a little bit on the limb, and I'm going to say it's actually like a 4 because
Okay.
I think that it promotes, after you've played it and you kind of understand what it's trying to do, it promotes probably better play styles and deck building that will serve you through the rest of the campaign and the rest of your Arkham life.
Yeah.
Again, not to take anything away from people who like building crazy decks and do all kinds of jank. There's a room for that in this card game for sure. But it probably teaches you to tighten things up a little bit when the time comes.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, I think my only like I agree with that sentiment across the campaign as a whole,
Mm-hmm.
but like specifically looking at this scenario, I just think that it bumps out a lot of investigators to a certain extent, more than normal and more than the other scenarios in this campaign.
That's fair. I agree that the 4 is a little bit of a wild take. I'm going to leave it there, but it's probably like a 3.5 or something in reality. But from like other campaigns and scenarios we've seen, I don't think there's really a play style that or a archetype, for example, that it really is going to knock out. Maybe the Doom stuff gets a little annoying because you don't know when Ancient Evils is going to show up, but other than that. All right. Sorry, a lot of talking about that one.
Very long one.
Experience.
Very quickly, I think that this scenario actually lends itself very well to the experience because you're in a jungle and the jungle hates you, and so does this scenario. And also, I think that a lot of the locations are really cool. Like I love the rope bridge stuff.
Me too.
I actually really like the narrative of this scenario, just like the plot points. It feels very cohesive. You're going to the jungle, you get the stuff, someone shows up, you deal with them, keep going to the jungle. It's like very straightforward. And it kind of feels like you're telling a story. And also I love there's so much flavor in this first scenario already. The sort of lead investigator being Leah Anderson, Ursula Downs, Monterey Jack stuff I love. And as I said, it both evokes the fiction, and I think that as we say in the bullet point, new interesting gameplay loop, I think for sure the Explorer is very new, and a lot of the ways you have to deal with the enemies is very new as well. So yeah, I think it's really good.
Me too. The fact that the act and agenda really push the story along. There's these points where you're afraid, things in the shadows, who's that running in the forest kind of thing about when the brood of yeggs come out. That stuff is cool. They do a lot of little snippets of story that help create the experience for me as well. And the supplies are all good for that as well.
Yep.
Where are you going to land?
I'll put it a 4.5.
All right.
That's where I'm going to put it.
All right. And notably, this isn't this isn't docking points for the fact that the scenario hates you. That is what it's trying to do.
Exactly.
4.5 sounds right to me too. Okay. This is a long chat, but it's a good one. I'd love to hear about y'all's experience as well in the comments. We do have more to talk about with the Return to, because the Return to shakes up a number of things. Before I let you all go, if you haven't played the Return to, we're going to talk about the difference in the Return to Explorer rules, and many of you who are just getting into the campaigns have probably heard, oh, the Return to, it's easier when you do the Explorer rules. Well, we'll talk about it, and I just wanted to put that plug there. So
absolutely.
All right. Okay, we are back to talk about the Return to. So some significant changes here.
Indeed.
Let's start with the locations, yeah.
Yeah, so the exploration deck is going to be set up. Previously, we had 5 locations and 5 treacheries. Now, it's just going to be 5 locations. So we're always going to have the River Canyon. And then of these other locations, you're going to choose one from each set. So 1 square, 1 moon, 1 heart, and 1 triangle. Randomly, of course. And you will shuffle those in, and that will become your Explorer deck of only 5 cards.
All right, let's look at the locations first. Yeah.
So let's do the Riverside Temple, which replaces Path of Thorns. 1 shard, 1 per. Forced after any number of clues are discovered from Riverside Temple, check your supplies. If no one has chalk at the Riverside Temple, you shuffle an equal number of cards from the top of the encounter deck into the exploration deck. Yikes.
It's an ancient location.
It is an ancient location. That is true, yes. So some of these new ones, that's actually the only one that's ancient now, right? I never noticed that.
Yeah, I didn't notice it until I drew, or no, someone else drew the arrows from the trees.
Oh, wow.
I was like, oh, I'm not in an ancient location. Oh, yes, I am.
Yes, you are. So yeah, I mean, that's honestly kind of tough. So I mean, it's not so bad, but it is bad. And we'll get to the new Explore rules, but that is, sorry, the new the new Explore rules, but yeah, that can be pretty bad. All right, we got the Waterfall, which replaces the Rope Bridge. 4 shard, 1 per. Reaction: when you investigate it, check your supplies. If an investigator has rope, reduce the shroud by 3. Hey, that's pretty nice.
That's nice.
I like that. It's a benefit, as you were talking about before. Force: after you fail a skill test, you discard a random card from your hand while investigating. So, I mean, technically, I guess it is a negative to a certain extent, because if you don't have a rope, then you're probably going to lose that, fail that test.
Yeah, thankfully not a victory point or anything. So
Yeah.
you don't. We didn't talk about this before, but you don't need to get all the clues.
Nope. All right, so we got the Cloud Forest, which replaces Circuitous Trail. 3 Shroud, 2 per, Victory 1. Forest, when an enemy at Cloud Forest will be dealt any amount of damage, check your supplies. If no one has torches, cancel that damage. Damn! So,
um,
I this rarely comes up for me because I usually have the torches, but have you ever had this happen to you? That seems bad.
it's not okay. So I don't think it's happened. So no investigator has it. Okay, I always
Yeah,
have it, but if the person who has it is not there,
right.
it's tricky.
And I
If
guess,
Ishchaka is
yeah.
there and you're trying to kill
Oh
her,
god. Oh god. Just don't kill her at that point.
mhm,
Yeah, I guess it's kind of one of those things where if you don't have torches, you're like, just evade,
just
and
evade.
if they have Hunter, then get him out of there or something.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's cute. I think it's fine.
Yeah. Lastly, Trail of the Dead, 2 Shroud, 1 per, Victory 1 to replaces Serpent's Haven. Forest, after you investigate or explore while at Trail of the Dead, check your supplies. If no one has binoculars, take a horror. Actually,
Fine.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I will.
the one with the compass is Circuitous Trail. I feel like this one is like either very easy or
Yeah.
really tough, and it's not replaced by something that is making you progress the game, I think.
Yes. I will note just a quick math thing. Um, these are the victory locations, right? But you're only going to get one from these two and one from these two. If you get it so that these two are your locations, you will have to get an additional 1 per clues from the non-victory locations to advance the first act.
That's
Because you
correct.
need 3 per.
Right, because Servant's Haven used to have more. Okay, yeah.
And if you get these two, then you get 4 per from both.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go with Chaka, the Ruins of Esli has 2 per, meaning that this is one of the ways for you to get all of the clues just from victory locations and still win the scenario. Previously,
Wow.
you'd have to get clues from somewhere else also.
If you draw these, I guess you can still draw these pretty early. Yeah, okay.
Yep. Because previously, I think for me at least, the strat is to literally just ignore these locations.
Yep.
And just go straight for these because these have the clues you need, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But now the math is slightly different.
Cool. I think this is an overall improvement, but also not significantly different where you shuffle, the two different sets and you're fine,
Yep.
I think.
Yep.
Okay. I think it's a good time to talk about the return to a rule, though, for exploration.
Indeed. So the new rule is going to be on the back of this return to setup card, and it's on the bottom there. For the duration of the scenario, oh, well, first of all, the map, I guess, on the exploration cap can be done from anywhere, so that's nice. But after a successful exploration ends, shuffle the top card of the encounter deck into the exploration deck. So, as we noted before, the encounter deck does not start with any encounter cards inside it, but after you successfully explore, aka you successfully bring a new location out, you're going to shuffle a card from the encounter deck into the exploration deck to be drawn later at a later time, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
So, theoretically, at the beginning, you are 100% assured that you're going to successfully explore because there are no cards in the exploration deck. But as the scenario goes down, you're basically the amount of cards in the exploration deck is going to remain kind of constant, but slowly changing the ratio between locations and encounter cards to be more and more encounter cards. AKA, it's going to be less and less likely you're going to successfully explore the later the scenario goes.
That's right. And there's actually other ways to shuffle encounter cards into the exploration deck. We saw one of them from one of these locations.
Yes.
Yep.
And there's a couple ways as well in the new encounter cards in the return to set as well.
Yeah. So, again, I mentioned before that people tend to find that this is easier because the beginning of the scenario, you are not just throwing your actions away to draw encounter cards.
Yeah. I think for a lot of people, the frustration that they find with the exploration or explore mechanic is at the beginning, you're like, okay, I'm all set up. We're going to explore. And I drew a snake bite and it poisoned me. That sucks. And so getting rid of them at the beginning is nice because what you're starting out with. You're like, we can get one location down. We can basically almost ensure that we get two of them down for maybe we'll draw an encounter card.
Right. And you're still, of course, drawing encounter cards from the encounter deck. Having a small map, like one location, because you kept failing your explorations,
Yeah.
means that when you draw your Pit Viper, you got to figure out how to get out of there.
Yep.
And that can be very tough. So there's something to be said for the bad experiences in the original version, putting you in a pretty bad spot at the beginning of the scenario. But
yes,
you do eventually clear out all the treacheries, or at least almost all of them, and exploration becomes very easy, especially in this scenario where 3 more locations get shuffled in. You are almost guaranteed to just find them by taking the explore action.
Yeah, honestly, like in this scenario, being able to clear out all of the treacheries in the exploration deck is a great feeling. Because then you're like, I know that the next card I draw will be this location. And we can move to it, and we'll get to victory and then move on.
Mm-hmm.
But in the return to, that is no longer the case. At the end, when you're, all the enemies are on the board, you're taking a ton of damage or horror. At that point is when the riskiest pulls happen, where you're like, this exploration deck is 2/3 encounter cards. That sucks.
And let's be clear, the encounter cards are not just treacheries.
Yes, it is now possible for enemies to enter the exploration deck. They actually clarify this in the return to pamphlet they have, that if you draw an enemy from the exploration deck, it's resolved as normal. It's just you drew an enemy. Honestly, drawing an enemy is so much worse than drawing a treachery, because drawing an enemy almost assures that you will not be able to explore again that turn, or you might just die.
If you do it for your last action,
yes,
and you
like
get poisoned, don't do it.
Yeah, you take
right?
a full enemy phase. If you're not the fighter, you're basically just screwed. Maybe the fighter already took their turn, and you're like, I'm going to explore, and they're like, oh god, I just drew an enemy. So yeah, I think that I think we've talked about this previously, but I think that we are in agreement to a certain extent that we believe that the return to exploration rules are actually harder, more difficult than the base base exploration.
So I believe this is why the check your supplies ability on Expedition can be used from anywhere.
Yes, because otherwise it'd be useless.
Right. There's no reason to do it on the first location, right?
Yeah.
And it does help you clear out not clear out, but it helps you sort of reorder the explore deck later on in the scenario. But yeah, I mean, I agree. This feels better at the beginning, and then at the end you're like, oh my god, the tablet is -5 forever.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think ultimately, I think what a lot of people say is that like the return to is easier, and my opinion at least is that the return to is harder. But I think that it is an unequivocal truth that the return to explore is just different. They are very different. I don't think you can 100% say one of them is easier or 100% harder, but I think that we can all agree it's actually a lot more different than people take credit for.
Totally agree. There's just they also, because it's so different, this rule is not for every scenario.
Yes.
For Boundary Beyond and Depths of Yath, this does not apply.
Yes.
There's lots of good reasons why that's true.
Jesus Christ. Imagine Boundary Beyond with this.
Oh. Anyway.
Oh God.
So it's different enough that it's an interesting shakeup of the rules. I do find them both to be fun in their own way, but this is much more difficult than people give credit to.
I agree.
Okay, we have some new encounter cards.
Yes, and this is the only ones. These replace the Lost Expedition encounter set. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
So we got 3 best laid plans. This is the... What is this?
What is it a replacement for?
Yeah.
Lost in the Wilds?
That sounds right.
No, maybe this one is that. No, there's 3 of them though. There's 3 Lost in the Wilds.
Anyway, whatever. Basically, yeah, peril. You must either lose 2 actions or you shuffle the top card of the encounter deck into the exploration deck. Ooh,
Ouch.
that 2 actions is tough.
Yeah, yeah,
I
especially
usually,
when you draw this, right? If you
yeah,
have, if it's during your turn, right, you might
yeah,
be able to say, okay, sure. But like, is shuffling the top card of the encounter deck into the expiration deck worth 2 actions?
yeah. I honestly, I think I mostly do that, and I usually just regret it later on.
Yeah, because then you draw.
It's
I mean, you lose the action. Well, I guess nothing happens if you just draw this from the encounter deck, right? And you can just take your
right.
turn as normal.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, yeah. If you draw this from the exploration deck, then that kind of changes the equation.
But then later, you draw something that might take away more than 2 actions, I guess.
Yeah,
The failed action to explore, plus whatever it
yeah.
takes to deal with that card.
You draw the serpent. You shuffle the serpent in, and that takes up like 6 actions total.
Yeah,
You're very good.
good card.
It is a good card. I think it's well designed. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Peril.
God, was there for whiles.
Yeah, this is okay. So you take a horror and then you put it to the nearest location that doesn't already have one, and then this is a way to add vengeance.
I
Um,
think I think personally that this was a way for them to be like, no, you're gonna get vengeance somehow, and you're gonna deal with it.
yeah, and I find that that's not true. As long as you don't draw this on the first location, you can usually work your way around.
I guess. Like I do think if you draw this if you draw this card on these locations,
Mm-hmm.
these ones that lead to the ancient ones, that can be really bad.
Yeah, you have to
Um
basically then.
because it kind of locks you out from getting, like, for example, if it's here, then in order to get this location, you have to go all the way back here
And then
and
down
then
here.
come back
Yeah,
down, and it's like so annoying.
that's true. But I do feel like this whiffs more than other cards that never whiff, right?
That's fair. I mean, it in the sense it whiffs because you're avoiding it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, you could add it onto a location. Like, let's say the team is already explored from here, and then but you're back here because you haven't moved yet. You draw this, and you're like, okay,
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
it can happen. I mean, probably more likely in higher player counts, but
Right. That makes sense.
is that it? Is this one replace the like low on supplies? Maybe that's what it
I
does.
think so. So, sorry, not it replaces the expedition encounter set.
Right. So that's low on supplies and Lost in the Wilds, pretty sure.
Yes. Yes. Wait. Lost in the Wilds is that the one that takes horror?
Yeah.
Wait, there's 3 of those.
Yep.
I'm confused.
I think the Best Laid Plans replaces that one, and then low on supplies is replaced by Resentful Wilds. I think
All right.
they're not really one to one.
No,
They're just kind of there.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. Yeah, I think that the Return to isn't super different. It's just the new rules that make it different.
Indeed. Yeah, the new explore rules definitely is the thing that changes it.
Otherwise, good.
Yeah, I like the loon locations. I like
Yep,
those.
me
Those are
too.
good.
The rest of it, I think, is just sort of it's still Untamed Wilds. They didn't fix anything like take away Ancient Evils. I will remark that it's interesting to me that this is the only Return to set that didn't come up with a different Ancient Evils replacement.
That is true. I didn't think about that, but that is true. Yeah, very interesting. I wonder what the either you ancient evils or you put it in the victor display as vengeance. That would be interesting.
Ooh.
Ooh,
And then you never
be fun.
draw it again. Easy
Yeah,
choice.
easy choice.
Or you shuffle it into the Explore deck.
Yeah, I was going to quickly mention. So this one, the map is the same for this exploration deck. It's actually not going to be the case for the next return to. So the exploration map on this one is the same. But
Good point.
yeah.
Okay, that's it for us now. I know it's a long scenario discussion, but we promise it's all kind of all good stuff that you're hearing from us. All interesting, thought-provoking, hopefully, comments, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments as well. All right, see you later.